Good morning. Good morning, everybody. What is wrong with my format? Let's see. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. I'm having a what's going on with my format thing. Must have been a gift from the computer gods, a new update. Woohoo! Well, I can see that there's quite a few people on, but I have lost the ability to scroll. Isn't that special? Well, I will say good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking Coffee Time this morning. Again, I do not know what's going on, but I can see a few names. Good morning, Robin, Cindy. Good morning, Mom, Sheila, Donna. Good to see you. Chrissy, great to see you. Janice and Penny. Kirsten, happy Monday. It's like, do I dare touch it? Yeah, it's almost like one of those Excel sheets or something where the story is off in the corner and I don't have arrows to look. So I'll keep an eye on the upcoming, good morning, Carol, on the upcoming notes and comments, but I can't see the earlier ones. I'll have to figure that out when I am not live, right? So good morning, everybody. Happy Monday, and how are you? I know, right? That's all right. At least the thread is working and everything else is on. I am working and I am on as much as I can be. Good morning, Catherine and Kira. Happy Monday. Hey, Patrice. Happy Monday. So, where to begin? I am in a bit of a fog. Let me catch you up on news. I hope some of you watched Bingo on Friday night. I know a lot of you did. We had our winners. It was a super fun night. Kira, again, thank you so much for all the help with that commentary, the hooking with words. It was a great episode. It was a great concept. And it really got me from point A to point B, having all that help. And I really do appreciate it. Speaking of help, I've been working on a couple of designs for people who are going to do some hooking for me, which I also really appreciate. Kirsten, I hope you still like this design. Kirsten, who helps me eternally in all ways, and I hope you're feeling good after your shot, with the Facebook page, which is Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. Kirsten agreed to do and you can always change your mind, of course, a latch hook composition for me. I did a couple of latches in the past, and they sold really well. They were both abstracts. And I've just been having a hard time getting in my groove with latch because of the very high pile of that medium, that version of rug making. It's still part of the family, isn't it? But it's very different. With that high shag, it number one runs the risk of looking very dated, right? Even a nice, fresh, new composition. And number two runs the risk of looking very pixelated because it will never be in focus and you will never get fine detail. At the same time, having said that, there's a couple things about latch that appeal to me, and one of them is the very graphic quality of it. So, and number two is the way that with the two kits I put out initially, I'm using like really high end, 100% wool, novelty fabrics, fun fur. I'm not using acrylic. So, or if I am using acrylic, I'm putting two pieces together, on one pull with something like an eyelash or something really fun with a lot of texture and character. So I'm thinking of them more as fine art latch kits. And Kirsten is going to help with one. I was trying to work on a design that had to do with fish or a fish tank. And I kind of combined this design. Kira, I hope you like the finished one because I'll get it ready for you if you do. Kind of an underwater. I framed it. I started off with an Andy Warhol pop art kind of design, and I thought I will do one fish coming into each panel, very Andy Warhol style, right? Cropped differently and coming from a different direction for interest. Because remember, whenever we talk about composition, it always comes up that using repeats or this multiples of something is always very striking. But in the end, I ended up framing it out with a lot of seaweed because for the seaweed, I really intend I'm going to be sending to Kirsten a lot of that very shaggy novelty fur stuff. Hey Joy, hey Amanda and Teresa and Carol. A lot of that stuff, but also if you're a knitter or a crocheter, have you seen in the craft shop aisle, one of the yarns that they've been doing for the past few years is that very shaggy but coarse yarn that is meant to knit or crochet into like a scrubby, like for dishes or for your body, for the bathtub kind of thing. You know what I mean? Very scrubby, coarse texture. Some of that too to latch with, right? Because a latch hook with a toggle is very forgiving, and it's remarkable how even really fine things like eyelash or that kind of stop and dash kind of interrupted novelty stuff, it goes through. You would never think that it would without jamming, but it goes through every time. So that's going to be one of the latch ones that's coming up. I'm trying to come up with a color scheme. Good, Kirsten. Tell me if you want to make any changes. Just do it, or I will do it. But feel free to make any changes you want. And then I was working on this other composition because you know what I have been forgetting to mention. I think I mentioned it around Christmas, that for Christmas I gave my mom and dad, of course, when he was alive, they used to, for Christmas, give each other a trip, like a weekend trip somewhere special. And they would use my sister and I as the sort of intermediaries to say, like, I'm choosing, the Berkshires, so that they both didn't choose the exact same spot or one town away, and the other one, I'm choosing like the mountains, like a ski resort kind of thing. And we would say, that's okay, that's okay. So he's been gone for years now. And this Christmas, I gave my mom a trip for Christmas to Cape May. And I forgot because I rescheduled it with our shot appointments and whatnot, both of us. I rescheduled it like twice. So it is this week. We are leaving on Wednesday. So I'm doing coffee time now. I will certainly do coffee time tomorrow. And then please be looking at the Facebook page, Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club, and also be looking at my blog on my shop, ribboncandyhooking.com. There's a blog spot. I will let you know. They tell me that the reception there is very good. The internet connection is very good. If indeed it is, I can maybe run a show or two from Cape May, New Jersey. We're staying at that beautiful old mermaid place, the Victorian place. It seems to be deluxe and great and fun, and it might be possible to run some shows. So be looking out in those two places, because I might even do like a pop-up show or something like that. But we'll see how it goes. Certainly today's episode, tomorrow's episode, and then be looking out as a to be continued as my mom and I travel to this beautiful place, and we are looking for help. Neither of us have ever been to Cape May, New Jersey. I always think of New Jersey. I'm sorry, Linda. I'm sorry, everybody from New Jersey. But I always think of it as bars and neon and not stuff that I like at all. But I know that there are a lot of Victorian historic houses there. It's one of these original seaside stops, and it just looks absolutely artsy and classic and historic. So if you have some great tips for me, feel free to write me at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. I'm really struggling with pages of stuff to do, but we're super excited. So to be continued with later in the week. Hello, everyone from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I am doing okay. I've been in, I have to admit, a terrible, very, very down mood, but I'm feeling a bit more upbeat today, and I'm super excited to escape with my mom. So on that note, I was working on some new designs, and I made this one that I think I'm going to put out. I was going to initially do it as a latch pattern, but I think I just taped it together. I printed it out, and I taped it together. I think I'm going to start it as a hooking design for myself, and I think this is the design I'm going to bring with me while we're gone. And I intend to do the same thing with hooking, using some of these scrubby, very textured novelty materials to do the hooking, using some wool too. But it almost has like a Book of Days kind of illumination frame on it, like a trefoil kind of a frame, a cloisters frame. But then a lot of opportunities with the seaweed for doing very sort of three-dimensional. I don't like to go too far and make it, real kitschy and crafty. But I'm going to be looking to strike a happy medium with that sort of seaside look, that pose. Hey, Penny. Yeah, it should be a really good time. So those two things are coming up. I also wanted to let you know. Oh, and by the way, I'm bringing, this represents, now I don't want you to think, I don't want to use the word sold out, but the swatches that I put out, the first 3 batches sold like this. I thought that was impossible, but they did. So I ordered another bolt of wool from Door Mill, because it's always Door Mill with me. And that makes 2 in 2 weeks, full bolts, which is great. That means business is great, and that makes me very happy. But for the people who ordered it on the weekend, I hope you noticed there was a note that said that this will ship on Monday, a week from today, because the door wool will be coming while my mom and I are away, and then I'll dye over the weekend, and I'll get it out on Monday. So the next swatches will be out. Hey, Katie. Hey, from the UK. But I cut all my mom's pouches. This represents not just these current swatches, but if you remember last month's swatches too, the swatch kit from last month, I cut them all for my mom to a number of 5 because she has been punch needling with wool strips cut to a 5, and she has had way more success doing it than I have ever had. I feel like I am super challenged punching with strips. It's not naturally my thing. So I'm going to watch her intently punching with the strips from the 2 swatch sets, and hopefully get inspired and get some tips from my mom. And just to let you know, the current swatch kit is available, and I will bring back quarterly. I will bring back all of the swatch sets because they're inexpensive. It does give you a lot of colors for your stash. I don't want anybody to feel like you were late to the game or you missed the boat or any other cliche. They will all be available quarterly. I will mark down a day once every other month, and I will just redo all of the prior swatch kits, and they will be limited until the next time I do that. So all of that will be available soon. One other thing, I also announced this weekend a dyeing class. I know I'm overdue to do a dyeing class. This is a different kind of a dyeing class. It's going to be on Mother's Day, so in the evening. I thought that could be a good day. It gives me something to do as a mother, maybe you too, or as a grandmother. Because it's in the evening, I thought the day is past and the flowers have been had and the food has been cooked and eaten. Good morning, Carol. So the theme is going to be Dutch flower fields, because you know that I was born in the Netherlands and my kids were born in the Netherlands and I lived there for a long time. The Dutch flower fields are absolutely beautiful, just stripes of crazy spring colors. And that is happening now through like early June, late May, early June, the beautiful flower fields. So that is the theme. And the class is going to be $95. It's a 2-hour class, and it comes with the class and the kit, which includes citric acid, synthropol, the 8 dyes, and I'm going to put the dyes into screw-off tops. I'm not playing with pouches anymore because it's impossible to open a pouch without it spraying you everywhere and getting all over the room. So everything is going to be screw-off caps now. I'm done playing games with pouches. And 8 colors. And also 4 quarters, long quarters of door wool, and 4 full skeins of Briggs & Little 100% wool yarn. So we're going to have 8 colors to do. We won't necessarily dye them all, but it's an introduction to dyeing. And I'm just going to work on dyeing them for 2 hours, answering questions about dyeing, and showing you the basics. So it's quite a big kit for the money, and I thought it was kind of a fun thing to do together on Mother's Day. Hey, Ralda, if you are interested in doing that. So having said all of that, let's get into our commentary. Let me know if I'm forgetting anything. Please thumbs up the videos. I'm sure I have more news, but we will get to it when we get to it, right? Now, this is such an inspiring book for me, and I've had it for a while. Sadie's Winter Dream. I've had it for a while, and the first thing I want to say about this book is that you're going to love it. And if you decide that you want to purchase it, please do. Thanks, Ralda. It is a good value. I want people who want to dye to be able to dye. And I'm putting the citric acid in giant pouches like this. So it's like at least 4 ounces of it. So quite a lot of everything. And then just the 2-hour class. It's an introduction. We might not get to all of the colors in that class if we're asking lots of questions, but you will see all of the techniques. And you can play later, of course, and do some mixing and all that stuff. But Sadie's Winter Dream, if you end up feeling that you need to buy this book, please buy it on the link that I show in this description. Do not buy it on Amazon. There are 2 copies on Amazon. One is $130. One is $840. This book is published by and for sale on the Mount Desert Island website, Historic Society website. And I put their link to the Historical Society, Mount Desert Island Historical Society, in the description of this video, and it costs $25. So please don't spend $125 or a crazy number on it. The book costs $25. When you look at these Amazon prices and what people post on Raw Cooking Buy and Sell, very rare book, very scarce. And then they show you like a screenshot of like it's on Amazon for $850. Well, it is, but it's also available from the publisher, the Historical Society, for its retail price, which is $25. It's currently available. So be smart about that. Remember that when you buy it, right? Because, yeah, that makes me super upset. This book has taken me some time to get to on this show. And the reason is, it's not a huge book, but it's very dense, and it's filled with historical commentary. And that is my favorite. And it's rug hooking related, because the book is about fishermen's wives and Maine Coast mission hooked rugs. So there was a mission similar to the Grenfell missions, similar to Chetty Camp, where it was an organized setup where women would be directed and instructed on how to hook rugs to earn extra income for household in seafaring communities where life was very, very, very bleak and dark, with no possibilities. So, oh, that's where you got mine. Oh, Robin, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. It's so easy to be pressured into buying things for the wrong price when just a little bit of research you figure out that it could be somewhere else. And it is somewhere else. So, this is one of these missions. Now, the reason it took me a while to get to it was because there's so much history at the beginning of the book, which I love. But I needed to read the whole book and then re-sequence it according to my idea of what the chronology of the storytelling of this story should be to a purely rug hooking audience. So, in other words, when you open the book for the first 20, 30 pages, if you're reading it just cold turkey, it is exactly, Ralda, exactly. It's much better to support directly the Historical Society than some boob on Amazon who's trying to make an extra $105. That is just rotten. Hey, Linda. Oh, great. Also, yeah, $5 is a bargain. Yeah, anything with the historical societies. And use this link because when I went on their website and searched for books and things they sold, I could not, if someone were holding a gun to my head, and thank God they weren't, find the link or the book. And I searched for the title of the book on the Mount Desert Island website and it didn't come up. So the link I found through a Google search, and the link is posted in this video. So it goes straight to them. Now, again, if you're reading this book just cold turkey, it's quite a few pages of history, and it was hard for me to get into. That's what I'm trying to say. It was a little bit hard for me to get into because I kept going, what's the part about the rug hooking? Because I wanted to do the storytelling with you here. So, Mount Desert Island in Maine. This is a story about Maine. We've had the 2 Canadian camps so far. Now we're talking about one of my favorite places, Maine. So I've reordered the storytelling so that we can look at it on coffee time. This sort of highlights the points, the major sort of arc to the story in what I feel is chronological order in terms of understanding the story and appreciating the story the most. So, having said that, I'm going to come into the book in the middle, which sounds crazy to my tab. And I'm going to follow my little tabs that say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're only going to get through part of it because it's such a good story. So, I'm going to start by putting on the glasses that are not the mid-range, but the close-ups. Man, am I a hot mess or what? So the part that I want to start with, when we talk, we're again approaching 20th century, 1920s, community of rug hookers who's organized by one woman. This is something that all of these stories have in common. And this one is set in Maine. So I'm going to back out of that for a second and revisit the other 2 rug hooking colonies, communities, for profit that were set up that we've already talked about. So we walk into it on a familiar path. And once we get into it, we'll start beating through the woods and making our way to this particular story. So let's start by saying, I'm going to talk for a second and remind you about the Grenfell mission, right? Because this is probably the most famous of the rug hooking missions. The emphasis of the Grenfell mission was to standardize pattern and design. A reminder, the Grenfell mission was a medical mission, and because the quality of life, as Dr. Grenfell found it in Labrador, Newfoundland, in these remote fishing areas, the quality of life was so low that he felt, and his wife and all the other people involved in that mission, that if they were to give the inhabitants, particularly the women, as the men were busy all the time, so were the women, of course, but while the men were away, the women could do something to supplement the income and make life bearable. Use their income to get the things they needed to survive. Quality of life, right? Not just quality of life, existing for some people. Health, literacy, having schools open, having churches open. All of these things cost money. But in terms of style, the emphasis of the Grenfell mission was to standardize the patterns and designs that they used. They used very specific designs, and they evolved very quickly a style using local animals, local landscape, a style, a look, and a color palette that was very unique to Grenfell. It makes them very easy to recognize and identify even without a label. The colors used standardized the size of the mat, the colors used, and to demand remarkably even workmanship in terms of technical work. The early rugs were made out of cotton flannelette, which soon gave way to the more sophisticated and elegant silk stockings. That's why they're called silk stocking mats, right? As Labrador, Newfoundland women gained skill, it eventually became difficult for one woman to differentiate her work from another woman's work. And indeed, the Grenfell Mission MAP program was called the Industrial Program. Machine-like industrial production was encouraged and rewarded. It was a huge endeavor, employed hundreds of women, and produced thousands of beautiful mats. The designs of the Grenfell mats were in the arts and crafts style, created by women who were artistically educated in that movement. So we're talking about the people who are teaching, the people who go to this region are the hot style is arts and crafts, right? That's what's in cities. These women have already gone to school for art. They are very skilled. They're trained. They're passing on their knowledge. They're dictating the subjects, the designs, the color palette, the height of the pile, and it becomes an industrial sort of camp where the reward and the level of success in having hooked a mat is judged by how exactly and technically right it is, right? I'm belaboring this point because it's important. You get technically beautiful mats, but they are of a style that has been predetermined, and the women are literally working and creating work that is fairly interchangeable. So this is I'm not taking anything away from it. I would love to have a Grenfell mat. I would love to buy one at an auction in the up toward the 10,000 mark, a really good one, and own that and appreciate it and look at it constantly. But my point is that this was not as much of a creative outlet as it was a problem solving answer to getting money, to making money in a way that you still had sort of pride, right? You weren't nobody's giving you a handout. You're making something, you're doing it right, you're being rewarded for your skill, and your quality of life goes up. So the Grenfell mission. And then we move on, not much further, 1920s, 1930s, to the Cheticamp region, because we've talked quite a bit about Cheticamp as well. Cheticamp in Nova Scotia with the efforts of Lillian Burke. And I did that cocktail night that I think was one of my best ones on Lillian Burke. Very emotional. She was such an important and lovely person. Completely different school of hooking. So Lillian Burke breathed new life into Cape Breton home industries. Again, this is a kind of clue as to what the output is meant to look like. Home industries. Burke was trained as a reconstruction aide during World War I. This was a new profession for women, and this literally meant that she was trained to teach therapy through handcrafts to men and soldiers who had been wounded, who had all kinds of physical and emotional problems. This was a new job that was created, like an early form of art therapy. When you do something with your hands, you can become very meditative. It can become very healing and helpful. So this is how she was trained. She introduced rug hooking to their lives while they recovered. It gave them meaningful work that they enjoyed, and in selling their rugs, they also made money. The work improved their morale. That's one of the important aspects of it. In the 1920s and 30s, this is the time period for this. Remember from this story, Alexander Graham Bell's daughter, who's called Marion Fairchild. She's a bit of a socialite, but also a great philanthropist and humanitarian, as were her parents. She starts marketing the Cheticamp hooked rugs in New York City, to leading decorators and architects, interior designers. Because of her status, she has a very good sort of entree to the powers that be. And she's able to put the rugs in front of the right people and get a goodly amount of money for them for the ladies who hooked them in Canada. So the large rugs had special appeal for New York decorators. Burke supplied the primary dyes in the burlap with her own designs. The large rugs required many women to work on them for months at a time, and they were paid by the amount of square feet they hooked. Burke was very exacting in the way she oversaw the rugs, and if she didn't like, for example, the way the colors were going, she would often have the women pull out their work and rehook. So the way that the rugs were realized, they really had to be to her sort of specifications and her taste. Because again, she was trained. She was trained in the arts. She'd gone to school, if you remember. We're looking at two prior and parallel. The Cheticamp is going to sort of run parallel to the story of the Maine mission. Three very different approaches. But the thing that the first two that I just sort of highlighted have in common is that there was a look. to the way the finished products would look. There was a look, there was a style that was to be desired, and that was part of the selling of these rugs, was that they looked a certain way. If you wanted to be a person who was involved in the project, you had to be willing to hook in the style that these ladies were putting in front of you. You couldn't be sort of renegade and deviate and do your own thing. It wasn't part of the deal. So the reason I made such a big deal out of that is that the story of the Maine mission is completely different because there is no look to their rugs. The women at the Maine mission, and we are going to go into this in much greater detail tomorrow. I'm not quite done for today, but the idea was to boost morale, to bring women sort of in touch with their personality, which had been lost over years and years of hardship, tap into their creative spirit and their sort of inner life, their imaginary life. And for that reason, the patterns were up for grabs. If they put a commercial pattern in front of you because you felt that you couldn't do an original design, if you could do an original design, you could do it. Just do it, and they're going to make sure that they sell it for you. But if you take a commercial design and you decide that you want to deviate and do something completely different, like we always say, I always say to you, if you get a commercial design and you have other ideas, get your Sharpie out, make the changes, do it your way. This is the way that the Maine mission worked. It's very different. I can't emphasize that point enough because number one, it makes it very hard for us to identify the Maine mission rugs, and not because they don't have a look. And number two, part of the thrust of the mission was to tap into women's spirit and character and personality. And that was, I don't want to say missing because that sounds negative, but that was not part of the ideal of the other two rug hooking missions. So let's do a little bit more before we get ridiculous. We'll do a little bit more. We're not really on a time thing, right? So now I'm going to start in the back of the story. Now, we talked about, I just mentioned Grenfell and I mentioned Lillian Burke. There's always one person who is the center, the anchor of the story. The story cannot exist, and it wouldn't have existed if this person didn't exist. And if this person didn't feel the way they did and have the strength, the drive, the vision to push this as far as it went. Carol says, I was born in Maine and my family is still there all over Maine. Oh, Maine, I love Maine. Maine is it's hard to beat. It's right up there with Vermont, but I love northern New England. I love all of New England. So this story is, the person behind the story is called Alice Peaslee. So her life is between 1880 and 1963. Now I'm going to do a little bit of biography on her life, which is not the boring part, it's the dry part. But I want you to know a little bit about her because she is the mission. And for whatever reason, we don't know a ton about her past life. She didn't talk a lot about her past life. A lot of it is not written down. Everything that the author found, and the author is Judith Burger-Grossart, everything that the author found about Alice was through, census and town records. Alice, when she spoke about herself or wrote about herself, always did it in the third person. A lot of distance between herself and her own life story. So we don't know why. She didn't have a great life, and maybe the pain created this distance. She needed insulation from the backstory. But it starts like this. Mrs. Alice Peaslee, she was a flinty, determined, and enterprising woman. She wanted to empower the fishermen's wives and improve their lot in life. Peaslee was not one of the fortunate ones. I'm paraphrasing from the book. I'm not like reading through. I chose bits. So the whole story is obviously going to be huge and lush. Peaslee was not one of the fortunate ones who discovered her reason for being early in life. Rather, it took her years to find herself. Only after she founded the Maine Seacoast Mission Hooked Rug Program was she able to find a special satisfaction in what she did. She was almost silent about herself and her past. She was born in Rockland, Maine, in 1879 or 1880. Her father was a barber who married her mom, Caroline. Because of his occupation, the one thing that we know is that they were not super well off. Alice was their oldest child. She had two sisters. And the author says, Judith says, I could find no record of Alice Moore's marriage to Jerome Harvey Peaslee. It took place somewhere between 1900 and 1906. And their daughter Caroline was born in Massachusetts when she was about 25 years old. So not a super young mom in this day. Um, Jerome followed the sea, the husband, right? So whatever that means. Now, Donald, their second child, was born in 1911. They only had the two. In 1910, the family was living in Hancock, Maine, just across from Frenchman Bay, just across Frenchman Bay to Mount Desert Island, right in that area. And Jerome was the lighthouse keeper there. So that was his job. It was the Crabtree Ledge Lighthouse. And Alice was employed as the local school teacher. So he worked in this lighthouse and she worked at the local school and with their two kids. Donald, who it seems develops polio and becomes very sick, and this is a very sad part of the story. It's not for sure, and it's not clear whether it was polio, but he's the younger child, and he's the son, and this will be a sadness that just runs through her life and cannot be, doesn't have a shape or a clear timeline. So Peasley was sort of emerging in their community as the school teacher and as a very strong person. She was emerging as a very capable woman who became very active and vocal in local issues, taking on new responsibilities every time she got a chance. She was a doer and a joiner, right? Hancock Point Light, where Jerome Peasley was keeping, was built on a half-tide ledge in the 1880s, and its function was to guide lumber and granite vessels up the Taunton River, as well as passenger steamers, because there's a lot of tourism to Mount Desert Island back in this day, right? We're not talking about very far from Bar Harbor, which is going to be another one of these beautiful, important resort destinations. So Jerome Peasley served at Hancock Point at least from 1910 to 1917. And during his post as a lighthouse keeper, two tragedies happened back to back. One of them was that two brothers drowned right outside the lighthouse, two local boys. So that was truly a tragedy. That was September 29th, 1916. And then shortly after that, 1917, March of 1917, there was another drowning. Captain Whitmore was on a return trip from Bar Harbor when a gale came up, and his ship went down right there, right near the lighthouse again. So three deaths within like almost 6 months for Jerome. Um, and it's hard to say how that took its toll on his life, because as you're about to find out, I'm going to run over a little bit because we're not having a ton of coffee time this week. It might turn out that we might, but let's push through for a little while. So these tragedies definitely had an impact on the family in that the household will move. Now, Alice becomes employed as the assistant missionary of the Seacoast Mission, which isn't there is no rug hooking sort of aspect to it yet. It's just the mission that's there to help fishermen and families who are in great despair, great poverty. So she becomes the assistant missionary. I mean, that's a very high position to take on. And her first assignment was to go to Crowley Island off Jonesport, Maine, which was much further down east. So they move, right? The lighthouse tragedies behind, they move. Now, in those days, the most practical way to get to Crowley from the mainland was by a rowboat at high tide. You can see this is going to be a very remote place and very problematic in a lot of ways. The Peasley family soon joined her, so she went ahead of her husband and the kids. Alice took charge of the religious work, and she taught public school at Mission Hall. This community was approximately 8 or 9 families, which made up 50 to 60 people. And this was a really dramatic change for her because at Hancock Point, where they had been previously, it was quite close to Bar Harbor. And of course, Bar Harbor is a wealthy summer resort where it's teeming with people and life and ideas and commerce. And going to a very small community via rowboat like Crowley is going to be like night and day for the family. In the early part of the 20th century, there began a real deterioration in the quality of life for people who lived in Crowley. Difficulties arose within the community. These are economic difficulties, as you can imagine. Electricity reached most of mainland Maine by World War I, but not Crowley, not for years and years. So there is growing despair, a lot of problems with drinking, a lot of problems with illegitimacy, a lot of problems with incest, infanticide, horrible things, stories about men exchanging wives. There's a lack of women. It has become almost like a Wild West frontier of desperation and despair. So a mission is obviously needed here, but it's a tall order at this point. It's very far gone. So Peasley, Alice is only one of two full-time employees in this setting at the mission, aside from the minister, right? So they're working with a very skeleton staff. Now, they move again. The family moves to Jonesport, according to a 1920 census. Jerome and Alice. And again, Alice is listed as a teacher. Now, Alice is 40 by now, and Jerome is 46. Now, here comes something crazy. She's listed as a teacher in the local census, but he's listed as no occupation. So at this point, it appears they have spent significant time apart, unusual, right, at this time, um, and he doesn't seem to be employed. She ends up getting him a job with the Maine mission, so they're both working there in August of 1925, and it's a temporary position. It's $33 a month, um, and again, it's temporary. It's month to month. So it's a sketchy situation. What's going on with their marriage and with their finances at this point? It appears that from the 1920s on, the Peasleys lived together only intermittently, and by the late 1920s, it was known in South Goldsboro, the town right there, that they had separated. Very unusual, right? Very unusual at this time. Jerome ended up dying in 1932. He was 59 years old. There's not a lot known about him. There's not a lot known about why they separated. She was obviously a very dominant person, him less so. It's hard to say or to speculate how the tragedies at the lighthouse took a toll on him emotionally, if he was not a very strong person and he felt responsible. Who knows? Having drinking problems, problems with alcoholism in this region is absolutely rampant. It's not the exception, it's the norm. There's lots of sort of speculation about what could have caused instability in the marriage and instability in his character. But in any case, they were apart for quite a long time and separated, and then he died young. So that leaves Alice in a position where she's still really not great off financially, but she has really evolved into a very strong person with a very rigid and self-righteous, not in a bad way, sense of what is right and wrong. She sees a lot of sadness around her, and she has a very strong drive within her to fix as much of it as she can by herself. So this is a side note that I thought was interesting. Oh, hey, Heather. Um, do you know the author, what's his name? Edward, is it, his last name's Mitchell. I feel like it's I think it's Edward Mitchell. He wrote a lot of books. I have all of them. He wrote a lot of books in the early 20th century, all histories about New England. Some of them collections of like seafaring stories, ghost stories, some about just customs of each state. Edward Valentine Mitchell, that's it, Edward Valentine Mitchell. They just call him Mitchell here, but it's Edward Valentine Mitchell. All of his books are fantastic. If you love New England history, you love old stories, he was the greatest historian of his era. Him and Edward Rowe Snow, who was like real specifically like Maine and Seacoast sea stories. But Edward Valentine Mitchell was amazing. He wrote a story called Anchor to the Windward, which is obviously a collection of nautical themed they're not stories, it's all nonfiction, but he was a remarkable researcher for that time, again, early 20th century. He wrote the following account of Ma Peaslee. He calls Alice Ma Peaslee. The veteran mission worker, while stationed at one of the islands, furnished the means for keeping one of the coast lights working, meaning lighthouses working. Aroused at night by a knock on her door, she opened it to find the lighthouse keeper, who told her he was having trouble with his light. What he needed to fix it, he said, was a rib from a corset and a large safety pin. And Alice provided these articles to him. So just out of this random book that's a collection of historical sort of anecdotes from the early 20th century, Edward Valentine Mitchell ends up writing about Alice Peaslee, not in the context of the rug hooking mission, but just as a person who in the community is a very well-known character, very self-sufficient person, very capable person. So while Alice was admired by a lot of people, the admiration was not universal. Now, don't we, particularly as women, know this story, right? No matter how kind you can be, how much you mean well, there will always be other people who don't like you. It's just the way that it is. And the sooner you come to peace with that, the better, right? The less sleepless nights you get. So the admiration was not universal. The women in the town accused her of having an attitude. On Loud's Island, Peasley's home was ransacked from attic to cellar. That's a quote. In other words, people went in there and trashed her house. And when she complained about it to the local newspaper, there was even more of a backlash in town because then she was seen as a snitch for having told somebody that her house had been ransacked. So it was obvious that these women were in her sewing circle, which was one of the few social groups around, right? In this part of Maine, very remote. This is the sewing circle is an organized group of women. And it's this group of women who accuse her of having an attitude, speak to her about it, are not satisfied with her apologies for having an attitude. And I guess we might say or guess that by attitude they meant personality, strength of character, integrity, who knows? But they didn't like it. They didn't like what they saw, and she could not make it right with them. So she got her house ransacked. This is an important sort of note because she will, as soon as the mission is founded, she will make. She had very few rules, right? You hook what you want, you hook it the colors you want, you hook it the style you want, you hook it the height you want, but you cannot gossip. Gossiping is not happening. We are not sitting around being small people gossiping, because obviously a lot of women in a small place have it in them to gossip. That was one of the only hard and fast rules. Absolutely not. We're here to do kindness. We're here to do work. We're here to be positive. We are not here to gossip. So whether or not this sort of hurt her, what her reputation was with the women in her community around her, however that made her feel, the only record we have of her response to it is that she was hard on gossips and nobody else. So it must have hit home to some extent. So maybe I'll pause here because the next chapter goes into what Alice did next. Now that she's a woman alone, she's doing what she can within the mission, but she's still seeing a lot of poverty and a lot of trouble, right? And she would like to fix the economic situation of the families who live around her. And she's going to do that with her rug hooking. And I'm going to tell you how tomorrow, because she, unlike the women in some of the other missions that we've heard about and read about, although they were artists, they didn't have any practical experience with rug hooking. She does. And her grandmother will be the link for her to introduce rug hooking to the mission as a viably economic way to make money, a job for a lot of women. And her grandmother's accounts of hooking are known to be the earliest references to using a hook to make rugs in the United States. So that's an important part of the story too. Her grandmother is an important part of the story in terms of the history. So to be continued, that was just the backstory. Tomorrow we'll talk about her setting up the mission, the designs that they did use, and the few things about the Maine mission rugs that you might be able to identify a rug by. They did come with labels, and for the most part, labels were removed universally, particularly if they were sold like in a gallery or a shop, the label would just be removed. So that part of the history is gone. But it's not impossible. There's very few known, but it's not impossible to identify one of these rugs. So tomorrow we'll talk about the setup of the mission, how it went, the look of the rugs, and we'll talk about the possibility of you or I identifying a Maine mission rug sometime in the future. There's more out there that haven't been identified. So tomorrow we will turn to Sadie's Winter Dream, and I'll also tell the story of Sadie. It's a very small part of this book. It's only one paragraph, a real sort of tear-jerker, but very romantic title to this book. We'll hear about that tomorrow too. So in the meantime, have a great day, everybody. I will see you tomorrow, and we will get back to Alice Peasley in the Maine mission. And have a great afternoon. I'll see you then.